Absolutely. It is so wonderful to have this gentleman with me. I've been reading his books for decades. And, this is someone who absolutely has been defining what work looks like, creativity and change. He's built his whole career around showing us, what meaningful and innovative work looks like. And it's not just reserved for entrepreneurs, it's even for the nine to fiver, even amidst chaos and obstacles. Seth has written over 20 books, I believe, and most of them have been New York Times best-selling books. He's a sought-after speaker. And today we're going to talk about the grind. And we're going to get some insight from Seth about how we can thrive amidst the grind and protect ourselves and still do work that makes a difference. Seth, thank you. Thank you for being here.
Oh, the thanks have to go to you. You show up for people who need you. The leadership coaching, the work on trauma, the ability to shine a light on folks who are in the trenches doing work that matters. It's thankless work, and you have to keep doing it and doing it and doing it. So I'm grateful to be here with you.
Wow, thank you for saying that. Are you a little bit of a playful person like I am?
Who knows what that word means, but I've been a game designer for a long time, and I haven't worn matching socks one day for the last 25 years. So I don't know what playful means. There you
You-
go.
You're a man after my own heart because I wanted to do a short little icebreaker. It's a simple one. You've probably heard of this kind of game before. Two truths and a creative lie. So I'm
Okay.
so I've asked that you give me just three facts and be creative. And I'm going to try to figure out the super wild one that no one could ever believe.
Um, okay. Uh, in 1974, I was detained and almost arrested on the floor of the American Stock Exchange in New York when I was 14 years old. Number two is I am a hot sauce fanatic, and I have a small line of artisanal hot sauces that I make for good friends. And uh, number three, Tawny Godin, who was Miss America in 1975, my dad used to tell people was his sister.
That's good. That's good.
Did I do okay?
You did awful good. And I'm stroking my chin here. And let's see. I'm gonna say it's not the hot sauce.
And you would be right, because I used to love hot sauce, and then I had too much matux one trip to Jamaica, and I blew out my sinuses, and I haven't been able to eat it since.
Wow. Oh, right. Well,
Well done.
what a life you've had. All right. So today's topic is creating meaningful work, even in a toxic work environment. That's the topic today. And, post-pandemic, Seth, I've been hearing this term or this phrase more about quiet quitting. And
Yeah.
that is that people are going to work, they're doing just the basics, and they're running home. And I'm thinking that this whole phenomenon that we're hearing about is really pointing to a discussion about work-life balance, perhaps. It's also pointing to a discussion about people's inability to do meaningful work from their
Hmm.
perspective. And that's my perspective, but is it that, or is it both, or is it something else?
I think quiet quitting is heartbreaking. And I'm not saying that as an employer. I have no employees. I'm saying that as someone who has found so much that matters in my life because I was able to do work that I was proud of. And you get 2,000 hours a year in work, give or take. What a shame to spend it just waiting to go home. And I think there's an alternative to quiet quitting, which I would love to talk about. Um, and when we think about work-life balance, that's a myth because there isn't work and life. There's just life. And we get to spend part of our life doing work. And if you're busy trying to balance those two things, you're always going to be stressed out. Instead, I think we all have, to different degrees, based on privilege, based on caste, based on where we are in our lives, we all have the ability, more now than ever before, to find a way to do work. Maybe not all the time, but some of the time that lights us up, that engages us, that we're proud of. And I would be ashamed to walk away from that.
Yes, I agree. And, you know, being in that situation, I was a teacher for 30 years. There are times where you do find you lose your way, you lose your
Hmm.
why. Uh, I don't think we necessarily, as workers, are trained or understand that it's on us to become engaged again, to ask ourselves, how can I be more engaged in doing the work? I understand the company has goals, but what interests can I develop?
Yeah.
Or what can I do to connect what I love to what they're asking from me? And I think that we need to take that on as a responsibility because I think boredom, going to work and just going to work and just to do just the nominal is boring. And that is a stressor. That's an
Yeah.
intellectual stressor to me to just go through the motions. So, what do you think are some answers to feeling alive at a
Right.
job that maybe you've been on for 25 years? You lost your way. Uh, Give
Yeah.
us some strategy.
Well, this is a great place to start. So before we look at answers, let's look for some questions and
Yes.
some explanations. 110 years ago, a guy named Frederick Taylor met Henry Ford. And Frederick Taylor invented the idea of human resources. Human resources means treating humans like a resource. It means treating people like machines. And Frederick Taylor showed up with a stopwatch and he came up with each movement that every worker needed to make a Model T more efficiently. And the expression jerk comes from what a reporter saw when he visited the Ford plant, because it looked like the workers were being jerked around by strings doing each movement they were supposed to do. Because factory workers figured out that treating people like marionettes would help them make more profit. They invested then in public schools so that we could turn out compliant factory workers. So if you think about the 12 or more years you spent in school, they never asked you a question they didn't know the answer to. And the entire way of getting through school is to do what you're told. Figure out the minimum you can get by with. Will this be on the test? And so when you get into the world, you're looking for someone to tell you what to do because that's what you've been trained. And corporations that try to scale to make more and more and more money try to find compliant factory workers, whether you're at the Ford plant or a Starbucks or anything in between, who do exactly what they're told. So that's where we begin this, that you have a desire, if you grew up in a typical schooling environment, to be told what to do. And your boss is trying to take from you as much as they possibly can. This is a formula for not a lot of satisfaction. But, and at the same time, innovation showed up. Innovation caused by humans, innovation based on the connection between people, innovation based on customer service, innovation based on finding useful solutions to problems. That isn't factory work. That's, we don't know what to do now. Do you have any ideas? So, with that grounding, I have some thoughts about how we can approach it, but I've been ranting, so I'm just going to stop talking and see if any of that makes sense before we talk about the next part.
Oh, absolutely. And really, Seth, I'm even thinking about the way I was even raised. It depends on how you were raised also. Before I even got to be a teacher, I was raised, especially as a woman, I guess, to be quiet, not be seen, not be heard, but be pretty. And even when I sometimes attempted to share thoughts and show off my intellect, I was at times reprimanded for doing so.
Yeah.
And so I was prime and pumped to to go into the school system, looking for that star, looking for a pat on the head, looking for whatever little awards that kept me in a little box. So I totally resonate with that. And climbing out of that and learning that has been one of the biggest struggles, but also my biggest delight is learning how to rediscover myself and give myself permission and give others permissions, the clients that I work with, permission to show up as
Right.
themselves.
Exactly.
So absolutely. And also I'm finding, you're in these high pressure workplaces. There's pressure and there's this urgency that is at the workplace. The grind culture is
Hmm.
fast paced. You're on the hamster wheel. It's difficult to stand back and just kind of look at what you're doing and to reflect because you got to get back to work that next day and there's so many things that you're batting and trying to defend
Yeah.
yourself against. You got the microaggressions, you got lack of resources. I can go on and on. So um I think sometimes that creativity, forget it. I'm trying to survive
Exactly.
the workday.
Exactly. So the word grind is critical here. So think about the best teacher you ever had growing up. Everyone has a best teacher.
Mhm.
Was that best teacher the person who stuck to the curriculum the most closely and got the best standardized test scores out of the classroom? I hope we can all agree the answer is no. So, where does the grind come from? The pressure you're talking about. It comes from the fact that when left to our own devices, we often look for a gold star. We often look for the well lit path. And so many teachers without a curriculum don't know what to do. So they accept the curriculum. Many uh, bureaucrats, principals, etc., because it's harder to build a new kind of school, do what the school board says, which is make the test scores go up and get compliance from the teachers. So we have all these false proxies. These false proxies are easily measured but distracting. So the standardized test scores are easily measured and they distract us from the difficult work of being a great teacher. And the trap in the case of teachers that they're falling into is once I can standardize the entire curriculum, I don't need a teacher to do it. I can get a computer to do it. And so the reason it feels like a grind is because you're being ground. And so what should we do about it? And I have a two-part proposal. The first part is to realize that if you are one of those great teachers, if you veer from the curriculum and bring humanity to the classroom and change the lives of kids, if you ignore the false proxies of standardized tests, but instead have legions of kids and parents saying that teacher makes a difference, I don't think you're going to get fired. I think you might feel like you're going to get fired, but look at all the teachers around you who have been fired. That's not why they got fired. And there are lots of professions where I believe if you show up and challenge the status quo and deliver what the profession is really for, as opposed to embracing the false proxy, I think you'll have an uphill battle, but you will be fine. And the second alternative, if you're not willing to do the first one and you work in a place that is toxic and traumatic and grinding you up, is you need to leave. And if
Hmm.
you're not willing to leave, then you got to do the first one. But what's not an option is staying and being ground up. That's not okay.
Wow. Absolutely. I totally agree with you. And I'm talking through the lens of education because I know that the best. Okay.
Sure.
Um, it's interesting how sometimes you lose such touch, you're so out of touch with yourself after a point, and you're
Mm-hmm.
so identified with the educational system, I have found it very interesting watching teachers literally lay themselves down on the altar of sacrifice, burn out, recover, just to do the same thing all over again. It is extremely interesting to me how there is that segment of the population who just, and I suppose, Seth, the what saved me was you. What saved me was reading your books because I didn't have the language to articulate for quite a few years what the angst I was feeling, the frustration that I was feeling. I have definitely burned out at least once and was trying to see, can I stay in this profession or do I need to get out? I think that's when I was really listening to your CDs almost religiously about work that matters, because you were the only one that I found at the time who was talking in a way that I could receive it. And it really did save me in a lot of ways in terms of, okay, where can I find the meaning in this? And number two, I fell upon some things on my own, like, oh, relationship with my students was number what I fell into this realizing that my students would do just about anything for me once I established a safe relationship with them, and then I could take them places. And it did allow me to experiment in small ways. I was fearful, but in small ways, if I saw that there was a general interest that they had in a topic, well, I spent more time on that topic, even though I was supposed to be on a pacing schedule. I was not. I was supposed to be by tomorrow. You're supposed to be on lesson 20, and by the next day, you better be on 21. I would buck against that and stayed with their interest at times.
Yeah.
And I found it to be fruitful. I got excited when their eyes lit up, and it just it made for great learning. I think ultimately I fell into those things. Um, but my question is to you too. Here you are, you have this recognition that I think I'm going to go for the work that matters. Oftentimes I think the pushback from your administrators or from your boss, it's there, even from other coworkers who see you sticking out like a not a sore thumb, but you do stick out because you're not
Right.
following the protocol. You're not following the program. Why are you on lesson 18? You're supposed to be on lesson 20. I don't, so there is the judgment and the stares and
Yeah. Okay. So
uncomfortable.
let's break this into pieces because
Okay.
here's what you're not entitled to do. You're not entitled to do pretty good work and insist on a gold star from someone who's measuring something else.
Mhm.
If you want to sign up to do work that matters, you got to be really clear and honest with yourself about how to get much better at what you do if you're going to do it outside of the norm. You can't just say, well, this is really nice and creative. No, you have to be off the charts good at it because the system doesn't want you to do it. You have to be so good at it, the system has no choice but to let you do it. And the second thing you got to do is willfully ignore the false proxies. Stress comes and burnout comes from wanting two things at the same time,
Mhm.
right? So people don't get stressed about lunch because they want lunch, they have lunch. We get stressed when we say, I want to do this, but I also want this feedback. I want to do this, but I also want this feeling of safety. I want to do this, but I also want to be home with my kids. When you have two different things that can't coexist, that's when it gets stressful. So if you're going to leave or are willing to leave, then you got nothing to lose. Lean all the way into doing it the way you want to do it. And if they fire you, fantastic. You were going to leave anyway, right? They're probably not going to fire you if you lean far enough into what you believe in. That means not only are you running a classroom the way you described it, but you're also the coordinator of three different after school activities. And you're also writing a note to every single parent once a week. And you're also, so that when you are showing up, you're a force of nature. Because if you're just pretty good at being a little bit on the edge, they can live without you. But what it is to be a linchpin is to do this work where it's just too hard to live without you. And so the first person we need to persuade is ourselves. We need to be able to look in the mirror and say, I can be the teacher of the year. Not because I'm going to win the teacher of the year prize, but because I'm going to act like the teacher of the year, and no one can keep me from doing that.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Yes, yes, yes. First person you have to convince is yourself. I like that. And to do work that is beyond just stellar. Just and once you bring in those results, honestly, it would be almost nonsensical for someone to let you go if you're bringing in and all your students are reading way above, a certain um, level, language or reading level. I mean, that's undeniable, and I did it my way. That's undeniable,
Yeah.
So I get you, I get you, and I think there's something to be said too about us learning as employees to halt that hamster on the wheel syndrome
Mm-hmm.
and just to learn to how to slow down and to be present more at our workplaces and to kind of like see what is truly an emergency, what really constitutes my attention versus what doesn't. Being present has made a big difference in a lot of our in leaders and employees lives. And I think this whole thing about multitasking, I have learned that if
Doesn't
especially in the areas
exist.
of what's important, if it's
Yeah.
if it's something important, if I'm delivering a lesson, I'm not multitasking. I'm fully
Nope.
present. And
Yeah.
I think that those are some two little things that I always suggest that employees learn, because you're bringing your whole brain and your insight and your
Yeah.
expertise to
The
a
real the real word the real name of multitasking is distracted. And the way I like to think about this is if you're having surgery, do you want your surgeon to be checking her email at the same time? If the answer is no, then what are you doing by trying to do two things at once? But I want to now talk about empathy because empathy feels like a soft word and it feels like it involves kindness. I'm in favor of kindness. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is this. We all hope that we will be treated by people who see what we see, who want what we want, who are going where we're going. But that's very rare, and vice versa. So your boss isn't you. Your boss is explaining some things to you via policies and systems that match what they think they want. They're probably doing it without empathy in the sense that they're not going to where you are. But we have to do the reverse if we want them to come along, which means we have to say, wait a second. I understand that my day would be better if I slowed down, if I was more conscious about this, if I had more work life balance. But will that be making my boss's day better? And if the answer is no, then why are you expecting your boss is going to go along with it? Right? And that's not based on any particular enmity your boss has for any group of people. It's just what it is to be a boss, which is your boss has to answer to their boss about what their boss wants. So, what we seek to do is find a more generative, resilient, and useful way to do work that ultimately our boss can brag about. Because we have to realize our boss wants something we don't want.
wow. Oh wow, that is so good. Absolutely. And when we put our boss in this fantastic light because we're doing some work that really matters and it's fulfilling the goals of the company organization. I love that. That's when you have almost carte blanche. Any boss who has sense will give you carte blanche and
Yeah.
will support your work. Oh, how I love that. Um, So you talk a lot about emotional labor. Ah, I love that. And this is emotional labor, doing work that matters, even when it's difficult.
Yeah, so
So,
let's decode that expression. Uh,
yes.
Ariel Hochschild wrote about it 60 years ago. And when she wrote about it, she was pointing out that Delta flight attendants, all women, were being pushed to smile and express that they were having a good day, even when they weren't. And she said this is a bad thing. It was a feminist track to say, why do we do this to workers? I have turned it around and said, actually, it's a privilege to do emotional labor because it's so much better than physical labor, right? That if you're digging ditches in the hot sun, you're getting measured on how many ditches you dug. And that's not fun. Whereas a professional shows up and brings energy to the customers, to the students, to the people around them. This is emotional labor. You might have a splitting headache, but you can't act like you do because your job isn't to dig a ditch. Your job is to make that person glad they came in to buy an espresso. So if they walk in to buy an espresso and you're grumpy with them, you didn't exert emotional labor. It takes energy to
Yes.
make that person feel that you're being positive. That's the work. Not only to be positive when you don't feel like it, but to uh, be brave, to show up, to do something you are afraid of when you are afraid, to lead. Leadership always makes us feel like an imposter. The people who don't authentically feel like leading never do. But if you're willing to pretend that you can see a path forward, it is more likely that the path will arrive. And so the emotional labor is to realize our job is to bring this possibility and energy to other people who don't have it but need it.
Wow. Wow. Yes. It's almost as if you're, I just want to chew on that and chew on that.
Okay.
Seth, so you're a leader. There's a lot of leaders out there. Leadership is awful lonely at times.
Mm-hmm.
And to find that bravery every day or however often you show up to put in that emotional labor to focus on doing great work even when you don't even know if the work is going to really resonate or ring true for folks. Where do you get the emotional resilience on an ongoing basis? There's a lot of times where you just feel like zippity doo dah, but but oftentimes for a while it's taken a
Yeah.
while for me to put a tribe together. you
Yeah.
know where do
All right.
you
Well, a few things. First of all, I won the birthday lottery. I won the parent lottery. I have a lot of privilege. So I can't tell you from personal experience what it is to grow up with a smaller bucket. But other people have had an even bigger bucket than me. So my lesson here is pretty simple, which is start with the smallest possible increment. So, for example, at the middle school down the street, the principal used to spend 20 minutes every morning greeting each student as they walked into the building, calling them by name and shaking their hand. Now, the first day you do that, it's scary because middle school students are horrible. And because you might say the wrong thing or you've got some form you need to fill out. Why are you here? But after a few days of this, it feels way easier. It becomes more natural. You've earned the right to say to Johnny, how'd it go yesterday, Johnny? You're not a stranger. So you don't give a TED talk your first day that you're out on your own to a million people. You give a talk to your dog, and then you give a talk to a 7-year-old, and then you give a talk to two people, and then seven people. And by the time you're on the TED stage, you're not freaking out because you practiced, you built muscles. And so, just like we need to build muscles to dig ditches, we need to build muscles to do emotional labor.
mm, So if I am going to apply that, I can apply that to this situation. Talking to Seth Godin, well, I had to be one step at a time to be able to have the kahunas to even email you to see, just to let you know what you meant to me and to see if you were available.
Well,
And
you're
here
very kind.
you are.
How many podcasts have you done?
Oh, I've done quite a few, maybe 100.
Right. So if I was your first guest, it would be different, right? This
Yeah.
is not your first rodeo. I love the expression. It's not my first rodeo. It would be even better if you could say this is my 100th rodeo. Because if it's your 100th rodeo, then a whole bunch of the drama goes away because you've built the muscles.
Hmm.
And so, the reason that it's so useful to have a coach is that athletes don't feel weak when they have a coach. They feel like they're doing what they're supposed to do, which is getting better. If you're going to work every day, every day, every day, 2,000 hours a year for 50 years, that's 100,000 hours. And not one time have you asked someone how to do it better? You're not powerful. You're an amateur.
Mm, yes. Open to feedback, open to getting better, seeing where we're strong and where we need to improve. Absolutely. And there needs to be dedication to that. So I wanted to talk about prioritizing our health because, I think that is part
Yeah.
of being able to do stellar work is to be in a place where we're healthy. Uh, and yet I'm finding a lot of employees just really, really just putting themselves last on the to-do list, even
Hmm.
feeling guilty when it comes to prioritizing their health over their work. And so, can you just discuss a little bit about maybe some ways in which they can align self-care to creating more innovative work?
Okay, so let's start with this. People used to lose limbs all the time working in the sawmill. You'd see people missing fingers and things. That coal miners still come down with illnesses that feel like they're right out of some Dickens novel. If you are working in a place where health issues are widespread, you need to think hard about whether that's where you want to spend your days. On the other hand, if there are people doing a job just like yours who aren't suffering the way you are suffering, it might not be the job that is making you suffer. It might be what you're bringing to the job that's making you suffer. Your story about it, your narrative about it, your sense of insufficiency or imposter syndrome, the way something in your past is being triggered by the work you are doing today. And if that's the case, this is an amazing opportunity for you to redefine what's happening right here to find joy in it. And if you can't, then you should leave and do something else. I have a friend who was a very successful lawyer. For 15 years, he was getting accused drug dealers and murderers and people who had been caught up in the justice system a fair trial and with great outcomes. And one day, his body said to him, "You need to stop," because he never was able to find the joy he needed to find in that craft. And you only get today once, and you don't get tomorrow over again. So now he runs a business that's completely unrelated. And while he's glad he spent the 20 years being a lawyer, he's even more glad he stopped. And so you got to figure out back where we started, in or out. Don't be half in or out. Either I can find a way to enjoy this as much as my peers do, or I'm leaving. And once you can commit to in or out, I think you will discover either one is a great choice.
Mm, yes, yes. That is right on. To just realize, and the word realize is something again which points back to self-awareness, spending a little time reflecting, which you'd be surprised that is something that I really push a lot of people to do is to sit back and And, who are you? And how are you wired?
Hmm.
And ask yourself the hard questions and get support in implementing some of those hard things. If it's hard to do it on your own, to
Right.
find some supports so that you can make sure that you're aligning yourself to some self-care, and so that you can do meaningful work. Because I do agree that being miserable and getting beat up just for a paycheck is not a way to live at all. So um, you're in a toxic workplace and you're there for now. You might be looking to leave eventually, putting a plan together. But you want to keep your motivation. I found Seth Godin, and so I know that, hey, I'm going to do meaningful work for however long that I'm here. So what's some of the ways that you can also lead some cultural change, bring some cultural change to the workplace, without needing permission? We always look for permission,
Right.
or oftentimes we look for permission, but how can we lead cultural change amongst other folks who may not be as enlightened because they haven't read your work, Seth?
Okay, so let's be really clear. If you work for a bully and you are uh, receiving trauma, you need to not wait and you need to remove yourself from that situation. But if you're calling the place you work toxic just because it's not as fun as you want it to be, or just because the things you're hoping people will support you doing, they're not saying yes to, that's probably not toxic. It's probably just not a match for the story you're telling yourself right now. And the suggestion I give people in that setting is start a book group at work, a voluntary book group that meets during lunch hour once a week. Generously invite people. We're going to read Seth's book, The Dip. We're going to read this. We're going to read that. We're not going to spend a lot of time on the reading. We're mostly going to talk to each other about our work and how we approach it. If you start a book group at work, I promise you're not going to get fired. It's just never happened in the history of the world. It's voluntary, it's over lunch. You're not reading controversial stuff. You're just saying, how do we talk to each other around here? And what you will discover is people who don't want to be in the book group won't join. And the people who do join are people who will help you realize there are other people at work like you. And once you have one book group, you could start a second book group with different people in it for Tuesdays. And we can start going down the list of these little tiny incremental steps that each of us can take to bring energy and joy to where we work. And we have to undo the indoctrination. The indoctrination says the boss is going to take everything, so I better hold things back.
Mhm.
The indoctrination of whining, because we've been trained to whine because it lets off steam. The problem is, once you let off the steam, now you got no steam. And it makes, I think, more sense to put the energy into something generative and productive, or as we've been saying, get out. But you can't have it both ways.
Yes. Wow. Really powerful what you're talking about. So there's so many ways that I think that we can take, kind of authority or more authority of our lives at the workplace. Even in a toxic work environment, there's all kind of choices that we can make. Like you said, we can just say, this is too toxic. This is definitely impacting me. Bye-bye. Or we can really sit and look at, are we really in a toxic work environment, or am I pouting about about some of the things that I can't do because for whatever reasons? But in the end, we can do much in kind of mitigating all the stress that we're feeling in a toxic work environment by just looking at the stories that we were telling ourselves, by insisting on doing better work, and just really having a standard for ourselves where we show up to work.
Yeah.
And when we show up to work, I'm telling you, a lot of stress just goes away. Just Rosalind, just Seth showing up to do the work that we're meant to do, and to lead others into and to invite others into that place of joy by, I love your idea of creating a book group, because inevitably it's going to start real deep conversations about the work that we're doing and how we can do it better. And that really, to me, deters us from feeling helpless
Mm-hmm. Yes.
in the midst of it all, wherever we are. And with that, Seth, because I want to honor your time, I'm going to thank you so very much for being with us, for sharing your insight, for giving us your ideas. You are so generous that my mouth has been on the floor for days. It will continue to be on the floor today.
You're the generous one, Rosalind. You've shown up over 100 times narrating for people on their journey. It's just my privilege to be part of it. So thank you for having me. Keep making this ruckus.
Absolutely, absolutely. So be blessed. And everyone, thank you for being here. Until next time, peace and love. Bye-bye for now.